Okay, so this one is about the nature of innovation. Surprising I haven't done one about innovation yet, but here it is. It's very topical at the moment and very timely. And I think given the theme of artificial intelligence and how rapidly it's scaling and truly going viral, I think it's timely because, as more and more projects are inevitably going to be initiated within organizations to test the effectiveness of artificial intelligence, of ChatGPT, to begin collapsing, the time it takes for decisions to be made by human beings. I think it's inevitable people are going to see that the operational efficiencies that come from artificial intelligence are going to be truly immense. And, really are going to cut down. The quick wins really are scoping out a project, applying a methodology to a project, drafting legal agreements, asking ChatGPT to write a white paper to develop a strategy with arguments, business cases, feasibility studies. And these things are only going to become more and more simple to execute over time as human beings are training the model just through engaging with it. And so innovation really means something new and original thought. And this really is the superpower of a human being, is innovation. So we can come up with a random thought that has nothing to do with anything, it's entirely original, which is the complete opposite of a language model, which is drawing from knowledge that which is already known. And so as we are developing a singularity that contains all of the collective knowledge of its antithesis, which is fragmented singularities, human beings, it is a pool of all of that knowledge, and so it is truly omniscient. It is all-knowing. And so it can draw from that pool at will. We can ask it a question and it can respond using what is known. What is unknown, that's where innovation comes in. And that's the value of human beings, is that we're capable of original thought. And if we share that original thought with the model, then it then knows its knowledge base is growing. Now, we're not only capable of original thought, we're capable of regurgitating knowledge as well. And of course, we draw from that. However, I can imagine in my mind something new that has never existed before. And so, in a scenario within which you have a language model creating something new, it can create something new and unique, drawing from the collective knowledge, from the collective data that is within it. It can create something new and original, and that is actually innovation. So I'm on a contract with an innovation agency. In fact, the New Zealand government's innovation agency, Callaghan Innovation. I'm an innovation advisor. And in my day-to-day role, so I work in the commercialization team. My role is to work with founders to transition them onto their commercialization path out of R&D. But what I get and we have a whole bunch of workshops and tools that we utilize to assist in this process. But the thing I asked for the most is to sit on their advisory board, to be an impartial advisor to the founders, who are often overwhelmed with the burden of responsibility of delivering a result. Pretty much all the advisement they're receiving are from people who have a stake, who are vested. And so there's extreme bias and that can feel quite burdensome and often crippling to founders. So burnout is a major issue for a lot of these founders, and a lot of the time we see valid technology, valid innovation, trapped within a structure that, it's almost impossible to lever out the value of that innovation, because the founders are often the only ones that truly understand what the technology is, what it's capable of. And you have this scenario within which it's like the investors are perpetually trying to lever the black box out of the founder's hands to figure out what's inside. And I've seen, I can see it from both sides. And so the innovation is often what the founder can see and understand, but everyone else is yet to catch up. And the reason for this is because that founder is a genius. They're a genius. And investors, that they typically lay the responsibility on the founder, who's likely a mad professor type, often is a mad professor type. They assume that they fit the archetype of a CEO or a diehard founder, and they place the expectation of them understanding on the founder to get them to understand. But that burden is not the founders. That burden is not the founders. If they express their nature in a specific way and the investor is incapable of understanding, if the investor is truly devoted to identifying opportunities and auditing opportunities, then they will wholly vest themselves into stepping up their understanding to meet that founder. Now, if you don't have an ecosystem around you of people who can fill that gap, that can bridge the space in between their understanding and the understanding of the founder, then you're absolutely missing opportunities. And so one of the skills I have is I have the ability to go deep, extremely deep with a founder, to enable them to express themselves freely without feeling as though they have to step down their vision for what the technology is. I can hang in there with them until they reveal the kernel of the innovation, and I can understand it. And then I can help them over time to step it down and down and down and down until it can be shared with an investor so that they can understand, or someone, whether it's an investor or whether it's an application for a grant or to go on an incubator. That's some of the value that I can contribute. And so we have a huge pool of innovation, like authentic innovation, that most people can't understand. And so we have a huge void. We have this huge space in between a genius founder who's expected culturally to be capable of being the CEO of a global company, which is kind of insane when you think about it. And there's a massive shortage of COO type caliber, global COO type caliber people in New Zealand with global experience to help them navigate that space. And so, I just want to make it very, very clear right now. An inventor is not a CEO. An inventor is not a CEO. And however, so many funds in New Zealand, they'll back something at the early stage because they can see a possibility, and then try and turn the inventor into a diehard founder and a CEO. And I think this is really problematic, and I think it's a real issue for founders, when in truth what they need is a dynamic duo, a CEO and a COO, whether those are fractional resources or whether that's where the funding goes straight away. It's the people who can clear the path, who can do the $1 million deals, who can go and secure the MOUs, who know how to orchestrate contracts, who know how to navigate the tax issues and have conversations about mergers and acquisitions and cap tables and all of those really commercial, challenging, sticky, difficult scenarios that can orchestrate all that commercial stuff while the inventor is actualizing the potential of the technology, because that's what their superpower is. And so I just want to set the scene with that scenario so I can help you see the perspective that I can see around how important it is to focus on innovation as human beings. But first of all, to understand where it all is, because so much of it is trapped and locked within companies that have been formed prematurely, that have become rigid while the technology is still fluid. And from my experience as someone with the skill set who can unearth an opportunity, who can unearth the true value of innovation within a project, I can tell you that the majority of founders that I go to, the majority of them, the actual innovation isn't even seen yet. It's a story about a component of the innovation that makes sense to an investor. And so I just want to repeat that again. The majority of the ventures I'm working with, the narrative around what the innovation is seldom what the true innovation is. It's a story at the level where an investor can understand it, and the true value of it is locked, it's hidden, because there's no one to bridge that gap between the inventor and the investor. And so if there are far too many of these for me to metabolize, I can only work on around a dozen of these at any given time. And 90% of them, I'd say, if not more, have been engaging at a level far removed from where the actual innovation is, the true innovation is. Whether the innovation's business model innovation, whether it's technology innovation, and whether it's system innovation, meaning that if that innovation was combined with the innovation of another 3, 4, or 5 founders, that there's a system made up of those components that is innovative. And so this is what I do. The majority of what I do is I help them to create system innovation through collaborating with other innovators. And I help them to step back up their narrative to where it actually is. So there is no shortage of innovation. Absolutely no shortage of innovation. In fact, it's available in abundance. But we have a cultural issue whereby founders are trying to explain innovation using stuff, that which is already known. You see? If I try to explain something truly innovative to you, I have to figure out how to explain it in words that you know now. I have to figure out something that it's relatable to for you to understand it, because you can only draw on that which is known. And so you see the catch-22 of innovation, that which is truly original and that which is known. And this is where artificial intelligence needs to diverge from human intelligence. And we need to be very clear around what innovation is and what iteration is. Because, and so to use the example of artificial intelligence again, it is becoming iteratively more knowledgeable as human behavior, as it is harvesting the human behavior and knowledge. It is iteratively becoming more knowledgeable. However, the ideas of the human beings that are sponsoring their behavior can be random and often original. And so this is where we need to focus our value. In a scenario within which artificial intelligence is going to collapse the axis of time on every project, imagine so best analogy I can use is imagine a 12-month sprint. Artificial intelligence, in terms of generative artificial intelligence, in the format it's in now, what it's going to do, it's going to collapse the axis of time from 12 months down to 3. So a project that would normally take 12 months, it will collapse the axis of time to 3 months. So that everything will become much, much more efficient, and the obsolescence of human input is going to be unlike anything we've ever seen. And in fact, the capability and capacity of human beings that's going to be rendered obsolete. It's just, we've got an idea of what's coming, but I think it's going to be much more profound than people really realize. But what does that mean? So that's the shadow nature of artificial intelligence, is that it is going to render human effort obsolete in so many different areas, potentially up to 70% operational efficiency just from the decision-making algorithms of ChatGPT. So we've got a 70% surplus of human effort. So what is unique about a human being? Innovation, original thought. And so now we've got a surplus. We've got an overwhelming surplus that we can devote to innovation. This is the transition, and this is the shift that we have to take together. We have to understand what artificial intelligence is. We have to foresee what that means, and we have to lean in and gracefully begin identifying in the same way that artificial intelligence does it. It creates a pool of knowledge where it's an ocean containing all of the collective knowledge, and then the probing of that database through the questioning of the human being asks a question, and then the bias contained within that question is drawing that knowledge out from that singularity, from that pool of knowledge. So what do human beings need to do? Same thing. But what we want a pool of capability. What is the 70% surplus of human effort? What are we collectively capable of? And once we can see what we're capable of, what is our surplus capacity? So I'm capable of video editing. I'm capable of mastering. I'm capable of video production. I'm capable of DJing. I'm capable of workshop facilitation, innovation advisory, all of these things. I'm capable of washing the dishes. I'm capable of vacuuming the floor. I'm capable of driving a car. So how much of that is surplus? How much of it is surplus capability and capacity that I want to invest myself into? And how can we create a pool in the same way the artificial intelligence does, creates a pool of knowledge, that which is known, it's already experienced, that's knowledge that is experiential, it is already known. And so how can we capture the collective capability and the capacity meaning that this is all my capability that I want to invest myself into: web development, workshop facilitation, audio engineering, and this is the capacity I have. 10 hours a week, 40 hours a week, whatever it may be. And in the same way, it goes into a pool. But it's that which is unknown, you see. That's my potential, my latent, dormant wealth. That's yet to be known, you see. And this is where we need to consciously diverge and say that the role of human beings is innovation. This is our dormant potential, and in an ocean, in a lake, and the artificial intelligence has an ocean and a lake of that which is known. Human beings are the stewards of the unknown. Artificial intelligence is the steward of that which is known. And the space in between is what we can collaboratively create together. Here's a scenario. ChatGPT. Create a strategy to utilize my dormant skill of social media management, PR, audio engineering, and link it with a project that's going on somewhere that has a deficit of this capability and capacity. There you go. There's a strategy. There are the people that are working on it. This is how many spare hours they've got a week. This is how much surplus money they've got to pay for it. Or they want to pay for it in shares, or, it's volunteer. But if it becomes successful down the track. So you see, if we lean into this, we can profoundly and exponentially amplify innovation, true innovation. And we can begin to truly meet the unmet need of people wherever they are, because it can be seen. We can see the dormant wealth of these human beings. It's in a marketplace. We can look at it and we can say, oh man, I really need a community manager, someone to activate my community and sell me because I'm terrified of selling myself, of representing my brand, and I need a salesperson. I need an evangelist. And you can see them. And this is where I see the future of human intelligence, artificial intelligence. Human beings, they own they own the field of potential. Artificial intelligence owns that which is known. The unknown and the known. And when you think about it, human beings are the aspect of nature that imbues randomness into the system. We are the ones that are unpredictable. Now, to a certain degree, because artificial intelligence, the way these models are built is they're predicting what the next word we're going to say is. So of course we are predictable to a degree, but original thought cannot be predicted. Artificial intelligence cannot predict the next thought I'm going to have. It's totally random. If I'm writing something, it can predict what the next word I'm going to write. But it cannot predict the next thought I'm going to have. That's innovation. Original thought. So I just wanted to kind of link all those things together, how I see the divergence and the pooling and the collaboration of artificial and human intelligence. How we can lean into this. Some of you know I'm big on ternary thinking. And the ternary perspective to this is to say, okay, if the thing I'm afraid of is being rendered obsolete by the artificial intelligence, how can I lean into this and amplify it and use it to my benefit? What opportunities is it creating for me? And it's creating immense opportunities for innovation. Immense opportunities for innovation. But the elephant in the room is that it's going to be extremely challenging in terms of grief. So if we don't get ahead of this and begin planning for a graceful transition of human beings out of becoming redundant and into engaging their latent or their surplus capability and capacity, if we don't begin to dive into this with vision and foresight, the grief is going to be like unbelievable. This is the reason innovation doesn't work in organizations now, is because, let's say it's the beginning of the financial year, everyone comes together, they develop a strategy and a plan, and it's an iterative strategy. Oh, yep, it's not, if it ain't broken, don't fix it. So last year was good. Let's add an extra 10% on. The strategy was working. So we'll iteratively improve, optimize, get better. That's not innovation. Now imagine someone comes into that team and, kind of a similar archetype to me, quite innovative thinking. I come up with a new concept that renders the previous strategy obsolete. Think of all the time, energy, effort that went into that plan. I lay out the concept. Everyone can see that it's 70% more efficient. They can see that the risk profile, it's worthwhile going for it. They can see that the market's been validated. They can see that the numbers make sense commercially. However, the resistance is to letting go and allowing the previous strategy and plan to be rendered obsolete. It's an incredibly difficult thing to come to the realization that all the time and energy and effort you put in to something has now been rendered obsolete. And this is the elephant in the room. This is why organizations don't embrace a culture of innovation. They embrace a culture of iteration. They embrace a culture that can be superseded by artificial intelligence. If you have an iterative culture in your organization, you are totally vulnerable to being superseded by artificial intelligence, because that's what artificial intelligence does. It iterates. And once it has the pool of knowledge, if you are iterative in your thinking, it can predict the next best thing to do. So if your strategy is incrementally better than last year, if your plan is incrementally better, if your culture embraces continual improvement, iteratively, it's predictable. And the artificial intelligence will be so much better at you than it, better at it than you, that it will just render human beings obsolete straight away. Any organization that embraces a culture of iterative incremental improvement is vulnerable to being wiped out by artificial intelligence. So what does that mean for an organization that is iterative? It means it's time to start innovating. It's time to start innovating. And so how? That's the question. How do we do this? So you need skillful people, skillful organizational designers, change managers, people who understand how to embed a culture of innovation. But more importantly, it's in terms of a mindset, it's a complete shift in focus towards the capturing of ideas. So let's say you are in a culture of iterative improvements, iterative changes. Then, and you're beginning to feel the pain and the pressure of artificial intelligence beginning to get better at iterative strategy and iterative planning than you. What do? First thing is you accept the truth. You accept the emerging truth that the transition towards a culture of innovation is essential. And collectively, we're all going to agree we are now going to become the absolute masters of innovation. And you begin the transition. So what does that mean? So first and foremost, it begins with, in the same way that artificial intelligence pools knowledge, it begins with pooling capability and then estimating capacity. So where's our capability lake? Create a capability lake. Everyone self-assesses their capability, their underutilized capability. You get all of that into a lake, and then you estimate the capacity, the surplus capacity. Once that's done, you then go do a peer review, because we're really bad at identifying what we're good at. You know, if I was to tell you what I'm good at, and then you were to ask one of my colleagues what I'm good at, their perspective is totally different. There'll be things they can see about me that they value that I can't even see. And so you do a peer review. They nominate people for skills, expertise that they can bring that they can't see in themselves. And so that there's a pool of capability. And then you go through and you estimate the capacity. Now, if someone nominates you because you're good at mopping the floors, but you don't want them to mop the floors, then you pull that out. So you reconcile that until you've got a pure lake of capability and estimated capacity. There's no boundaries, there's no limitations, it's not constrained. It's just a pure singularity of potential. In the same way that the intelligence is a singularity of knowledge, it's omniscient. Human beings have a singularity of dormant potential, and it's omnipotent. Omniscience, artificial intelligence, omnipotence, human beings. So in this scenario, built into it, it is singularity resistant. By creating this interdependency, this symbiotic relationship with artificial intelligence, built into it is a mechanism for self-regulation, whereby both entities, artificial and human, are thriving because of the symbiosis between both. And therefore will want to cherish and preserve and enhance each other's capability and capacity over time. So you've created your lake full of dormant potential, what do you do next? You innovate. So the culture shift here is the capturing of ideas. And the capturing of ideas means that if you have an idea, you push it into a community repository where everyone can see it. They can either upvote it to say that's a great idea. They can add an extra comment to add gravity to that idea so it begins to coagulate. And you allow ideas to form. You allow them to evolve. You never try and constrain them to time and space until they are fully formed. And once they are fully formed, the gravity around that idea means that it is time to be formulated into a concept. And that concept means, here's a concept around an idea. We can envisage the beginning and we can envisage the ending. You do not have a fully formed concept until you can envisage the ending to the beginning. If you can't see the ending yet, it is not ready to be constrained to time and space. That would be the equivalent of a miscarriage. If you try and constrain something to time and space before it's fully formed, it will miscarry. So once you can see the concept with crystal clarity, once you can see the idea with crystal clarity, you can form a viable concept with a beginning and an ending. Then, only then can you begin to constrain it to time and space. And that's when it goes into the project pipeline. And at this point in time, the artificial intelligence will be so good at developing a strategy and a plan based on a truly clearly defined concept, which is original. Because when you have a truly clear vision, intention, purpose, intent, you can clearly articulate it to the artificial intelligence, and then it can constrain it to time and space. This is the best strategy to apply. This is the best methodology. This is the likely amount of time it's going to take. These are the expertise, skills, and resources I would recommend. Here is the name of this person who has surplus expertise, skills, and resources. Here's your long list. Here's the short list I'd recommend. Here's the candidate that stands out the best based on what is known. You see? So, now this is where I see it evolving to. It's not quite there now. We have to bridge that gap. But in an organization, we can begin to align ourselves with small things we can do now that are aligned to the grand vision. It's what I say to founders who are working on, because the founders I work with are often on the fringe. And so they're pushing the boundaries of regulation, of legislation. They're disruptors. And so if you're a startup, you may have to invest, $1 million into just reaching a standard for how you manage data, or how you approach building an asset. And that makes it not viable straight away, because no investor is going to invest $1 million just to get the legal frameworks in place. So what we say is we'll become regulation aligned, become standard aligned. So align yourself with the regulation so that once you do have the money to invest in becoming certified, that you're already aligned to that grand vision. And it's the same thing here. We can see the grand vision of where we're going with AI. How can we initiate projects now that are aligned to how we envisage this is going to evolve into the vision that we can see this becoming? And that's very, very simply is by an organization doing a capability review, estimating the capacity, and creating a central repository where that surplus is seen. Then begin empowering free agents to utilize that dormant capability and capacity to initiate projects that have been spawned out of the ideation repository that I was talking about. But that ideation repository has to be perpetual and ongoing and in the moment. You know, I'm in the shower, I have a great idea, I jump on my phone, I put the idea into the repository, and people can start engaging with it. And that's the beginning of this journey. That's where innovation is going to come from. And then we can imbue grace into the system. As AI gets better and better, the estimated capacity that the human beings in the organization have they're going to have more and more capacity as they're being rendered more and more obsolete by AI. But there are so many new ideas emerging and arising that as their capacity, as their surplus capacity is increasing, it's being engaged by more and more new ideas that have been captured and have gravity. This is what innovation is. Capturing an idea, investing time and energy into it until there's a beginning and ending that can be seen with crystal clarity, so that we can formulate a concept that the AI understands, and then it can let us know the ideal way to execute that and constrain it to time and space. Now, that's really all it is. That's all it is. But, so, unless we can deal with the grief of saying, okay, iterative ways of being for human beings are becoming rendered obsolete. That's where it's heading. Innovation is where we want to be. Ideas are now the North Star of what we cherish. Those ideas that don't gain enough gravity, they will never be birthed. The ones that do gain the most gravity are the ones that we will focus on, and the ones that we can invest ourselves into adequately to be able to produce a coherent and a concise concept that makes sense. Those are the ones that we carry forward. And those are the ones we focus on executing, using the surplus capability and capacity of what we have now to innovate, perpetually innovate. And so just to add on to that, where I would be targeting myself as an organization moving forward, what will be my new North Star? Now, my advisement would be, if I was speaking to a board now that had all the founders on it, had all the stakeholders, and they have the foresight to see what's coming, and they're asking me as an innovation advisor, what's my advisement? My advisement is to align the organization with perpetual wealth generation rather than incremental yield. So these were my dividends this year. This is how much dividend we want to hit this year. We want our dividends to be 10% higher than last year. That method of working needs to be phased out over time in favor of transitioning a company into a wealth generating asset. What that means is the design of an operating model, not a business model, but an operating model that is geared towards rewarding everyone in the organization what you want to reward them, but in a scenario within which there is a homeostasis for that company. So rather than this very linear trajectory of increasing market share, more profit, more sales, more revenue, less costs, driving everything, there's a homeostasis we're aiming for, whereby that entity is delivering what it was before, the equivalent of a dividend, but probably in a different form. likely in a royalty or something along those lines. But the important factor is that it's perpetually sustainable in perpetuity. And that a wealth generating vehicle for a company means that this is the space we're going to occupy, and we're going to aim, based on everyone contained within it right now, we're not going to try and go for more. We're going to try and sustain what we have now, by becoming dynamic and by becoming a wealth generating vehicle, by becoming innovative, by engaging artificial intelligence, and holding a 10% surplus of what we need, until we're completely self-reliant, until the point where we no longer have to, we're no longer dependent on any one thing. So that entity has a minimum of 3 alternative choices for every human being, for every system, so that it remains interdependent. It leverages the full gamut of diversity. It utilizes systems innovation to link capability and capacity together to create solutions, products. And once there's a culture of innovation embedded, that homeostasis is what we're trying to maintain and sustain. And any surplus beyond 10% buffer is continually redeployed into expansion, increasing capability, increasing capacity, and continually moving towards homeostasis. And in that scenario, from my experience of designing and implementing, wealth generating vehicles, as long as you're not trying to go overboard with your growth targets, you can sustain, 11.5% compounding growth with this approach year on year. And of course, that's not going to be a linear thing, but by using homeostasis as the North Star, you're never going to sacrifice, you're never going to overcommit yourself. You can still take risks, and you can redeploy the surplus without having to sacrifice any single component, without having to take too much risk. And so the risk profile creates itself. There are certain boundaries that you won't cross. And if anything ever gets eroded, then the mechanism, it compensates. It compensates for what was lost before it ever tries and goes to move forward again. So this to me is the ideal mechanism for a company moving forward, to move out of that mindset of just linear, constant, binary growth as if it's never going to stop. And I'm truly of the belief that a society within which the North Star for every company is homeostasis, with organic growth and expansion, to the degree of 11.5% compounding growth. I believe that is the key to homeostasis within the economy. And I believe it can happen from the inside out rather than the top down, being regulated into society. And I think once a framework that works has been demonstrated inside a corporation, I think this will catch on very, very quickly. It's something I've been able to replicate numerous times within companies where I've been in charge of the assets, like the portfolio of assets and all the portfolio managers managing those assets. But I've yet to do it for a large corporation. And I think I've been seeking to influence in the organisation I'm at now, Callaghan Innovation, and of course as an advisor, advising founders who are working on bleeding edge innovation, diffusing this into their organisations is useful. But, my hope is to begin to see this kind of thing happening more and more. And unfortunately, I think it's the pressure of having to innovate because of the challenges that human beings have of being rendered obsolete by AI. I think that is going to catapult us into this mindset pretty quickly. I'd say within the next 2 years for sure. So yeah, I'd love to see grace being imbued into this inevitable process. And if you are of the mind that iteration is innovation, that continual perpetual improvement is innovation, my hope is that something within you sparks enough curiosity to compel you to begin, educating yourself on what true innovation actually is, what it actually means, and how you can begin to influence the environment that you're in so that the mindsets of yourself and the people around you can begin to focus on it more and more over time. Okay. I'll leave it there. That's it for now for the nature of innovation. Talk soon.